Later on in this video, Daisy then goes on to sell and promote these bands that she's just mentioned could help you activate your muscles. So is this actually a video to help you with your training, or is this actually maybe more of a marketing video to help Daisy sell some more bands that she is marketing throughout this video? It's Christmas and I'm all bunged up again because I can't escape it. I don't know what's going on. Basically, I figured this. Obviously, the new year's upon us in a few days, and a lot of people are going to be online searching the interwebs for some training advice and some bits and bobs, especially as they're either getting into training now or they're trying to do something better or something slightly different, because it's obviously new year, new me and all that good stuff. So we're going to talk about one of the things that is most commonly misunderstood and one of the almost biggest lies and misconceptions that is floating around the industry, and that's going to be activating your glutes. And Daisy Keech is going to help us with that with the Why Your Glutes Aren't Growing 7-minute activation video.
I was never activating my glutes or my legs in any sort of way, and then throughout my exercises when I'd go to work out, I wouldn't feel the burn in my butt. I'd feel it in like other muscles, like maybe my quads or whatever. I'm like, what the hell?
So one key thing to note there is sensation. Just because you don't necessarily feel a muscle working doesn't mean it's not working. If I'm looking at a bicep curl, for example, just because I may not feel my biceps working when I'm doing the curl does not mean they aren't working, because if they weren't working, I categorically would not be able to perform that movement. So for example, with your glutes, when you're doing certain movements, just because you don't feel it doesn't mean that the glutes aren't working. But also, could you maybe alter the movement to make it a bit more glute bias? So let's say you do a leg press, for example, where your legs are really low and you're getting high levels of knee flexion, so your quads are really working there. Could you maybe alter that movement slightly, bring the feet up a little bit higher to help lengthen the glutes a bit more, but minimize how much the quads are working, to then shift some of the emphasis from the quads to the glutes? Again, without muscles working, the movement probably wouldn't be able to be performed, but there are ways you can alter movement to then maybe bias the target muscles a bit more.
So I did some research, and I learned that if you do activations with bands, you can help activate that muscle, and then your body knows to use that muscle.
Oftentimes when people say I did some research, that actually usually refers to I did some Googling. Oftentimes research is not what it should be and not what it seems, where you're actually looking at kind of evidence and academic journals and whatnot, looking at meta-analysis and whatnot, but it is often just Google, why can't I feel my bum when I squat? And they'll come up saying, oh, activate your muscles. In reality, if your muscles weren't activated, categorically, you'd be in a right mess. Like if I stand up and my glutes weren't activated, which then therefore implies my glutes aren't turned on and working, I'd fall to the ground and flap around like a fish. They are activated, they are working, they just maybe aren't feeling great sensation for many different reasons. And you've also got to consider, later on in this video, Daisy then goes on to sell and promote these bands that she's just mentioned could help you activate your muscles. So is this actually a video to help you with your training, or is this actually maybe more of a marketing video to help Daisy sell some more bands that she is marketing throughout this video? And then when it actually comes to the movements themselves, we're looking at things like this, like a banded crab walk, where because you're maintaining this slight squat position, your glutes are going to be maintaining tension for a long period of time. If your glutes are then maintaining tension for a long period of time, they're going to fatigue very quickly, which then makes you feel like they must be activated because they're tired. And then once you move on from doing these quote-unquote activation-based movements onto your actual workout, let's say a squat, an RDL, whatever it may be, because your glutes are now fatigued, they are probably going to burn a bit more and hurt a bit more. And then by default, you're going to assume to yourself, wow, my glutes must be activated. Well, actually, no, that's probably not actually what's occurring. What is probably occurring is your glutes might be pre-exhausted. That does not mean you've managed to magically turn them on. It just means that you fatigued them earlier on in the workout. Therefore, they will reach fatigue quicker later on in the workout and be more of a limiting factor than if you were to have done nothing leading up to it. And then you kind of argue, is there a place for pre-exhaustion or not? It depends. And what I mean by that is, to pre-exhaust is to essentially train muscles with isolation movements before going into primary movements afterwards. You might do a pec deck fly before bench pressing to then feel your chest more when you're bench pressing. You might do crab walks and things along those lines before squats and RDLs to then feel your glutes more when you do squat and RDL. Again, just because you feel them more doesn't mean you've actually made the movement better. It just means that they are just more tired. When we look at the pros, we consider things like this. Let's say when you're doing RDLs normally, your lower back gives out first, and you really want your glutes to give out first. Again, we know to effectively build muscle, we need to train to, if not close to failure. If your lower back is at failure, but your glutes are miles away from failure, failure, the amount of effective stimulus your glutes are going to receive from that movement, which will promote growth, is going to be a bit limited. But your lower back might be experiencing the stimulus you wish your glutes were experiencing. If you then pre-fatigue your glutes, maybe this might kind of reduce the gap, like close the gap to the point where actually maybe your glutes are actually giving out before your lower back does. Therefore, you could actually potentially argue that movement may become more effective for the target muscles, being the glutes at this point, because they're the limiting factor. They're what is giving out first. Fantastic, love that. But then I flip around and say, well, is your lower back fatiguing because your glutes are weak, or is your lower back fatiguing because technically there's something that needs to be addressed? When you're RDLing, perhaps, is the bar or the dumbbells too far away from the body? Are you not hinging the hips enough? The key thing to note before you do any kind of pre-exhaust stuff is standardize your technique in a manner that actually aligns with what you're trying to achieve. So like I said with RDL, keeping everything close to the body, hinging the hips, and not going down to the point where the hips are no longer hinging and your lower back is taking over. Once you standardize those things, your glutes will kick in a lot more than they may have done previously. Therefore, you may not have that issue anymore. If you still have that issue, then sure, you can consider doing isolation movements first. Oftentimes when it comes to glute training, I would actually put in something like a hip thrust before an RDL, because I typically like to work a shortened position movement like the hip thrust before a lengthened position movement like the RDL when it comes to glute training. Not in all cases, but in a lot of cases out of preference. Down below, there's a bloody sale going on. Using code TFNL2024 is going to save you some dollar on not only the workout guides that are linked down below in the description in the comment section, but also on the Train Heroic group coaching, which is a group coaching platform where it costs less than your Netflix subscription, or even less now, where you can follow a program that I've created for you and I update in real time for either at home or at the gym use. So that's definitely a pickle if you want to tickle it. And also down below, you've got the link to the TFNL coaching where you can apply to work with myself, Ryder or Beth on a one-to-one coaching basis where we can help you work towards your goals, whatever they may be. Have a gander down below at any of those things. And if you throw in the TFNL 2024 discount code, you're probably going to save yourself some dollar too. And that's going to run until the first week of January. Do you need bands or anything along those lines to help you activate your muscles? Absolutely not. If anything, I'd say don't waste your money. When it comes to things like that, I'd probably consider things that might be a bit more beneficial to you. So for example, if you're doing an RDL, I'd actually rather you invest in wrist straps. Regardless of how fatigued your glutes are, your grip is still probably going to fail first if you don't have wrist straps to help compensate for that grip deficit you may be experiencing. So you can strap up and remove grip as a limiting factor. I'd also actually learn how to brace effectively, which is completely free. There are loads of great free videos online of how to effectively brace your core. And in doing so, it's going to help limit how much your lower back essentially fatigues. It's also going to help keep you pretty safe when you're lifting and keep you lifting pretty efficiently too. You do not need loads of fancy pieces of equipment to actually have an effective workout. What you do need to do is understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you could do it better. So like I kind of said earlier, before you do anything, make sure your technique is standardized. Make sure that you are lifting how you should lift for the muscles you're trying to work. And once you've done that, make sure you can maintain that technical consistency throughout the entire set. We want to avoid technical failure being the limiting factor. So we want your muscles to fail before your technique to fail, because you've then standardized your technique to such a point that even when you hit failure with a lift, your technique is still solid and the muscles are the ones failing here, not the technique. If the technique is failing because your lower back is roundy and you're giving up, it's all a mess, but your glutes still have 5 or 6 left in the tank, you're actually missing out on a lot of gains here. Whereas if you can standardize the technique to the point where your glutes are actually failing because you've actually figured out how to lift effectively and efficiently for you, then yeah, you're closing that gap further and you're making sure that you aren't missing out on as many gains. Then after that, you can consider maybe, do you need to pre-exhaust? The answer for a lot of people is probably going to be no, but you certainly can if you want to. Like I said, pros for is it could close the gap of what's failing first and kind of compensate for any deficits that may be occurring. But flip around, there's also the argument that if you're doing loads of glute activation movements to fatigue before RDLs, and we know that the RDL is probably going to be a more effective movement for the glutes because of obviously the importance of exercise sequencing, that it indicates that movements done earlier on in the session are going to yield a better stimulus for hypertrophy than movements done later on. You are probably, again, potentially missing out on some gains. There's an argument for or against however you swing it, and it really does essentially come down to do what's best for you. But personally, I wouldn't waste my money on bands or anything along those lines. I'd learn to lift a bit better, and actually I'd also learn to understand the fact that sensation doesn't correlate to effectiveness. The heavier and heavier you lift, the likelihood is the less and less you're going to feel things. Mind-muscle connection is nowhere near as important as people think it is, and when you're lifting heavier, your focus is going to be on actually lifting lifting the weight and trying not to bloody well die, basically, versus actually just trying to feel every movement you do and limit how hard you're actually training. Well, whichever way you swing it, training intensity is key. You probably need to train harder than you actually are, and if that's too much for you, then you have to accept that you're going to be limiting how much progress you can make. But again, just my thoughts and opinions. I'd love to hear yours in the comment section below. I hope all of you had a fantastic holiday period, however you celebrate it, and I hope all of you have a fantastic new year. Thank you for tolerating me. Thank you for tolerating more stuffiness, and thank you for tolerating the video.